I'm sure it'll be long in a second. But anyway, I can sort of give the background on this because I think this will actually be really helpful, not even for you guys, but for anyone in the future. Also, the CSMs might want to see it too, just so they understand how it all works. So 90, I'm going to say 99% of the orders we receive from procurement systems come via cXML. So I think both of you have worked with it a little bit, but I wanted to do a deep dive on what the elements mean, why they're important, and run through exactly, why they work, why things work the way they do. So you should be able to see my screen. So this is just a random New England Biolabs cXML PO. And it is a standard cXML document. Most, if not all, will have this document definition type. We do not validate this. That's the first thing to note. We don't really care as long as it's a syntactically correct cXML file. We don't get to dictate what it is. We can't enforce standards because there's 120 different procurement systems. Everybody has done their own flavor to it. There are some commonalities, but that's why we always have to do mapping, move things around because we're middleware. So we just sort of accept it. And whenever a cXML order is actually posted to us, we have to acknowledge it. All cXML is asynchronous, so we have to respond with a specific accept or reject. And let me go to an EB to grab one of those. They get a ton of orders. But these are just a good old HTTP header post. There's no bearer token. There's no nothing. No one uses that because the standard's been around for 20 years. So it's just something that we have to accept. We can't change it. So let's see. Yeah. So when a request comes in, it gets posted to us. We then respond with this. So we have to tell them that it's acknowledged. Really, these are very similar to HTTP codes. They're not exactly the same, but a 200 or a 201 really is the only acceptable response, meaning it was successful. 200 means a full accept. 201 usually means a soft accept, but it'll process later. We always return 200, but 201 is, sometimes returned by certain systems that I've seen. So those are the only two responses. As far as the response, still usually does have a DTD. Some systems are more sensitive to that. If somebody wants a different DTD, that's fine. There's not much here that really changes. We don't return anything else like an order ID or anything like that. It's just, okay, we got it. Version number, this version number just matches the DTD. Usually we leave it as 1.0. There's really, in 20 years, it's gone from 1.1 to 1.2 to 1.2.0044, I think is the latest version. It's on cxml.org, but we don't really care about that. It just, typically we do have to have the DTD present. Then we respond back with this cXML, this payload ID. So this is just a randomly generated number, and then we append it with the account that it's set up. So we just generate that and then append it, because this is NEB. It's at neb.gwpunchout.com. It's just the payload ID, so they can say, oh, okay, this is the payload ID I got back when I sent this to Greenwing, or really for NEB. Timestamp, ISO timestamp, or a date C in PHP. Response status code that we already talked about, that 200. You can put different messages in here. We just do OK, which is the normal standard. Some people, if there's a downstream system, they might give you more information, like successfully created order ID, whatever. We don't do that, because our system just accepts it and then does something with it, typically. Like Matthew, the PO generate that will, for frontline safety, that we accept it in cXML and then we do conversions afterwards. None of that matters, because it's a downstream system. And as far as the buyer is concerned, it's already been accepted by frontline through us. Any questions on that? That's the easy one. That's just the response.
Nope.
All right, so where's our other one? So then we get into cXML PO. So this, again, here's the main definition. Looks very similar to the response timestamp. It's usually an ISO timestamp. As you'll notice, little variation. There's a space there. We've noticed that some platforms don't really follow the standard. And actually, this causes issues with NEB. So Eric has done a lot of transformations where, like, this actually, there's a space there. Shouldn't be a space there. So we'll clean that up. Sometimes there's a plus instead of a minus. So we have to, like, standardize that. So just because it's wrong from their system, we don't reject it. We just accept it and then clean it up for the client, because that's what they pay us to do. Payload ID. This one's actually really important, because we'll use that later on the invoicing. And so each document in general has a unique payload ID that will tell it exactly what the original payload identifier was. And when we do an invoicing one, whenever in the next couple of weeks, we'll go back to that. But this is absolutely used, and actually also the timestamp is used very often as well. Then version, which just mirrors this one. So this is a Jagger PO. These are pretty vanilla. They don't really have any anything major that's specific to them. They're very forgiving. So this is the header. So these are the credentials that they are sending us and what our CSMs will give to someone to connect to us. The only ones that matter on our side are the from identity. So when we say from identity, it's header from identity. So Wisconsin, NEB, and that's our username. The other one that matters is this one, the sender shared secret. So we validate on this and this. That is it. We often will send a domain value, and we just tell them to use network ID, but we don't validate it. We use an XPath that we traverse to cXML header from credential identity only. The only time we ever use this is if we have to, but if we actually look at NEB and Wisconsin, actually, it's the order request. So we are looking for cXML header from credential identity. It's actually called order from identity. So cXML header from credential. And actually, that one's not technically correct. It should be identity, but because it it just traverses to the next element, it'll get to this regardless. Make sense? So the other one that we define where it is a shared secret. So this order sender shared secret, cXML header sender credential shared secret, which should be this value. The reason we do that is because it gives us the maximum flexibility. If we need to map to a different field, we can. Our system is looping over what's in the from identity first to determine, is this a valid buyer? If it is a valid buyer, then we basically say, yep, it's in the system. If it doesn't even exist in our system, like let's say they put Wisconsin NEB1, we just say, no, 401, we don't know who you are. So we don't even bother checking the password or shared secret in this case. So that's essentially how the authentication works. None of these other fields actually matter. We give them to people, we generate them, but we don't actually do anything with them. This is how most systems work. Some people use sender identities and shared secret, but we started with this from identity and shared secret, so that's what we stick with, and it really doesn't cause us any problems. So the values that we're comparing to on this one and this one are actually defined in the buyer preferences. So these should probably look familiar. So we're checking this value, which is right here. We're checking this value, which is right here. And that's what the router and or parser, if it exists, are validating against. Make sense? Okay, I'll also assume yes then. So again, these really don't matter. These really don't matter. This one doesn't matter either. Neither does this identity. This one even says SideQuest, so we don't look at that. User agent, that's going to be the procurement system that's sending it. So this is SideQuest. Sometimes, you know, if it's SAP Ariba, it might say Ariba, it might say Ariba Network or something like that. But that's really all the header does, is it defines, you know, who I am, where I'm coming from at the organization level, not at the user level. We'll get into that when we do the punch out side. So then we get into the request. So this is the meat of it. There's a lot of stuff in here. So there's two deployment modes. There's production and there's test. Our system in general will flag an order as test. We do look at the deployment mode. Here's another caveat of an idiosyncrasies of e-procurement systems. They don't always send that tag. They will send test in when it's a production order. I don't know why. It's the way their system works. We've seen that happen so many times. And again, we will either do an override to not look at